when Chelsea took the lead against Ipswich with this Alan Hudson effort.
Beating them, and I've had my worst memories, but I've only played up at Ellen Road a couple of times and had a complete nightmare, so that's probably how they judge me.
They called him Huddy, not Alan, not Mr. Hudson, just Huddy. Because when the ball listens to you, even the streets shorten your name. He was raised on the World's End estate, a London maze of grey walls and goalposts made of brick dust. 5 minutes from Stamford Bridge. 5,000 light years from protection. His father was Fulham, took him to Craven Cottage, taught him about Greaves and Johnny Haynes. But Fulham rejected the boy, and the boy never forgot. Not the badge, not the silence, not the sting. Chelsea came next, and Chelsea didn't scout him. Chelsea couldn't avoid him. By 17, he was feeding Osgood with passes from another dimension. By 20, he was the best young playmaker in England. Elegant, arrogant, untouchable. But Alan Hudson never played the political game. He didn't wait his turn, didn't lower his head, didn't care for obedience. He believed in rhythm, in risk, in freedom. And freedom in football is dangerous, because the game loves talent, until talent stops listening. He wasn't designed to be managed, he was designed to be unleashed. And that's why football would spend the next 50 years trying to bury the boy it couldn't break. Before the coma, before the council eviction, before the hostels, the crutches, the flat that went silent after his mother died, before the world started calling it his fault, there was just the boy with the ball, and the game that would one day take everything. Subscribe if you still believe betrayal cuts deeper than failure. Because this story isn't about a career, it's about what the game does to the ones it can't control. The King's Road story always sounds glamorous. Osgood, lighting cigars, Hudson swirling whiskey. But behind the music and medals, Chelsea was tearing itself apart. Alan Hudson wasn't just Chelsea's best passer. He was their identity, the tempo, the arrogance. The local boy who played like the street still owned him. But that's exactly what Dave Sexton hated. Sexton didn't want personalities. He wanted silence. He didn't want flair. He wanted discipline. And Hudson refused both. By 1974, the damage was done. Sexton, and are fed up with the rebellion, suspended both Hudson and Osgood. Not a quiet word. Not a warning. Suspended. Transfer listed. Sold. Hudson never played for Chelsea again. Not a farewell. Nothing. Chelsea were collapsing anyway. Results nosedived. The club broke apart. Sexton was sacked months later. But the exile stuck. Hudson was gone. To Stoke. To prove he never needed Chelsea's permission to shine. Years later in a hostel, walking with crutches, he said it out loud. Chelsea have given me absolutely nothing. No card after the crash. No call when he lay in a coma. Not from the club he carried as a teenager. Not from the club where he became a European champion. A fan petition once begged Chelsea to honour him. They ignored it. The manager cut him. The club left him bleeding. And Alan Hudson, he never forgave either. Not the man who wrote the sentence. Not the badge that signed the execution. There was no fight, no headline, no screaming match in the dressing room. Just a phone call that never got answered, and a door that slammed shut forever. Alan Hudson refused to report for an England under-23 tour. No grand reason, no PR excuse, he just didn't go. Because back then, if something didn't feel right, he didn't force it. But Sir Alf Ramsey wasn't built for freedom. The architect of '66 wanted structure, loyalty, obedience. He saw the no-show as insubordination. So he did what cold power always does. He made an example, a 3-year international ban. No warning, no second chance, no shirt. Hudson watched England from the outside while he was in his prime, creating magic at Chelsea, bending matches at Stoke, while lesser men wore the lion on their chest. He never played in a World Cup, never got to write his name on the big stage, because he ignored a call. That's all it took. Later, people would say he was his own worst enemy. But inside the silence, there was something uglier. A game that punished imagination if it didn't come wrapped in respect. Hudson wasn't dropped for form. He was punished for independence. And Ramsey? He never reversed it. Never offered a way back. Never looked again. Alan Hudson didn't forget. Didn't forgive. Because that ban didn't just block a cap. It robbed him of history. They thought they'd buried him. Sexton sold him. Chelsea shut the door. London turned the page. But Alan Hudson wasn't finished. He was just free. Stoke City didn't ask him to change. Tony Waddington didn't demand silence. He gave him space. trust. The one thing the big clubs feared giving. And what came next was football from another planet. Hudson became the centrepiece of a team that danced instead of chased. The working man's ballet, Waddington called it. A title charge, real momentum, passes so sharp they cut defenders in half. PFA Team of the Year, respected, released, alive. Stoke didn't try to tame him, so he gave them art, and they nearly gave him a league title. But the system doesn't allow rebels to win for long. Behind the beauty, the club's stadium roof collapsed in a storm. Financial ruin followed. Stars sold, dream dissolved. And just like that, Hudson watched the only manager who ever understood him lose everything. Not because of results, because of infrastructure. Football couldn't let him win. Even when he played by the rules, the roof still caved in. It's the only chapter of his career without betrayal. And the only one that ended in heartbreak anyway. Because even when football doesn't punish the man, it finds a way to kill the moment. For a moment it felt like justice. Don Revie made the call. Sir Alf was gone. The ban was over. And Alan Hudson was finally going to wear the shirt he'd been denied. It was March 12th, 1975. Wembley, England versus West Germany. World champions, arrogant, undisputed. And Alan Hudson destroyed them. He didn't just play, he conducted. England won 2-0 and Germany looked confused, like someone had changed the rules without telling them. Then came 5-0 against Cyprus. Another masterclass, 2 caps, 2 wins, 7 goals scored, none conceded. And then, nothing. Revie vanished, no explanation, no next call-up, no place in the squad, just silence. Hudson never knew why. Some said attitude, some said reputation. But deep down it was the same reason as always. Genius unsettles the establishment, even when it behaves. And then came the insult. 1978. Ron Greenwood calls him up as a late replacement for a Brazil friendly. Hudson refuses. Not out of spite, out of principle. If I wasn't good enough to be named first, I'm not interested. That was it. His England career, 2 caps long, ended not with a bang, but a late phone call and a quiet no. Hudson didn't regret the decision. He regretted the system, because even when he was perfect, he still wasn't welcome. He was 25, still sharp, still dangerous, carrying the weight of clubs that never understood him. When Arsenal called, it felt like correction, a second chance to be great on his own terms. But Alan Hudson never knew how to fake respect. And Terry Neill never knew how to forgive disrespect. On a 1977 pre-season tour in Sydney, Hudson went out drinking after a game against Celtic. So did others. But only 2 players were sent home. Hudson was one of them. That was it. No final warning, no redemption arc, no second act. He never wore the Arsenal shirt again. And the story stuck. Not Hudson the playmaker, not Hudson the creator. But Hudson the problem, the risk, the indulgence, the one who never learned. What they didn't say was that his knees were failing, his body already whispering its final warnings. And now the game was branding him unmanageable. Again. He didn't argue with Neill, didn't fight it. He just packed his boots and walked into silence. Another London club, another manager who saw rebellion instead of brilliance, another door that closed forever. And Hudson. He never forgot the night. Not for what he drank, but for what they made it cost. It never happened on the pitch. No whistle, no shirt, no debut. But the war between Brian Clough and Alan Hudson didn't need a match. It only needed a room. Clough wanted him at Nottingham Forest, saw the genius, knew the fire, thought he could control it. But Clough didn't sign players, he claimed them. And Hudson, he'd spent his whole life fighting to be unclaimed. The meeting was quick. 2 men who hated authority, 2 voices that didn't wait their turn, 2 kings in a room with 1 throne. It fell apart in minutes. Hudson later said, "Clough was the only manager who made me feel small, and the only one who wanted me to shut up. There was no middle ground. Clough demanded silence. Hudson offered football. Deal collapsed. No contract. No Forest debut. No trophies. Just another chapter of what might have been. Years later, people called it a shame. Said Hudson missed out on glory. Said Clough could have disciplined him into medals. But they missed the truth. This was never about medals. It was about identity. Hudson didn't want to be tamed. Clough didn't want to compromise. And sometimes football doesn't give you villains. Just 2 men who refuse to kneel. And walk away hating the echo. It was December 15th, 1997. No ball, no cameras, no pitch. Just Alan Hudson walking across a London road. The car hit him like football had hit him his whole life. Fast, cold, and without apology. 59 days in a coma. Over 70 operations. The doctors gave him the last rites, said he'd never walk again, said he might never speak again. He survived. But what came next made the crash feel like mercy. The wife left, didn't want the disability, didn't want the crutches, didn't want the reality. His mother, his last refuge, took him back in, let him stay in her flat on the World's End estate, where it all began. Then she died, and just 3 days later the council came knocking. The tenancy was in her name, you'll have to leave. So Alan Hudson, England international, European champion, packed his things and moved into a homeless hostel, surviving on £100 a week in disability benefits. No job, no safety net, no call from Chelsea, not even a card. The man who once ran Wembley like a concert hall was now monitored like a parole case. In a room with thin walls and no memory of applause, and somewhere in that silence, you start to understand. He didn't just lose football, he lost everything it promised would protect him. He's 74 now, the boy from Chelsea whose feet once made defenders fall and stadiums rise. 2 England caps, 2 wins, 7 goals scored. None conceded, but decades after the applause, the silence hit harder than any tackle. In 2023, Alan Hudson made history again, not on the pitch but in protest. He became the first England international to ask the FA to erase his own record, not from shame, not from drama, but because when he broke, the game stayed silent. The fall began long before the headlines noticed. A hit and run in 1997 left him in a 59-day coma, followed by 70+ operations, years of rehab, and no way back. And no one came. Not the club, not the country, not the game he gave his youth to. He tried to rebuild. He poured 150,000, everything he had, into a dream property in Cyprus. It collapsed. He was bankrupted, evicted, and left sleeping in hostels after his mother passed. He said, "I have nowhere to go. I have hit rock bottom, and I don't see any way out of it. All I have is my laptop, a shaving bag, and my crutches. Every day now is a chore." And when he asked for his England caps to be wiped, it wasn't self-hate. It was a message to those who turned their backs. He gave everything and got forgotten. Not just his legs, not just his money, but his dignity. Because the game doesn't just chew up rebels, it buries them. This wasn't about erasing his name. It was about exposing the system that only loves winners and punishes the ones it couldn't tame. Subscribe if you still believe betrayal cuts deeper than failure. Because this story isn't about stats. It's about what football does to the ones it never learned to forgive.